The Etheric Double, The Health Aura of Man by A. E. Powell. Hello, I am Daisy, your hostess. If you just found me at this video, welcome. Glad you found me. And to my family, friends, and subscribers, welcome back. We are in the home stretch, diving into the final chapters of this book. The human aura is a topic that has filled the pages of many, many books. Yet the knowledge is so esoteric that the science of today is but only looking into some aspects, touching just the fringe. In the previous chapters, the author ventured into explaining the etheric double, the emanation of prana, as well as the chakras and their functions, and he also discussed latent energy found in the lower spine, known as the kundalini. This book was published in 1925, a reflection of esoteric wisdom being brought from travels of the Far East to the Western continent. For students of esoteric knowledge, for the seekers of wisdom, and for those that understand the aphorism that was famously inscribed on the temple of Apollo at Delphi, know thyself. We find treasures in these old texts that help us gain better understanding of that Greek aphorism, noti sauton, know thyself. And at the same time, we of this generation can look back through the rearview mirror and see how many barriers and taboo have been shattered in the name of science and the light shed on the dogma of religion. These next few chapters are definitely a reflection of that time period. We can wade through these chapters, perhaps garner something useful, or we can chuckle as the author ventures into the topic of the ectoplasm, which was said to be a substance spiritually claimed emerged from the bodies of mediums during seances. I discovered that the term ectoplasm was coined by French physiologist and Nobel laureate Charles Rickett in 1894. He borrowed the term from biology, where it had already been in use to describe the outer layer of cells, cytoplasm. While ectoplasm was a hallmark of the historical spiritualist movement of the late 1800s to early 1900s, it is no longer a central practice today, largely due to accusations of fraud. Considering that apparently it only worked under dim or poor lighting conditions, and then photography was in its infancy and the quality of images were questionable. It's unfortunate that it doesn't matter what field, in my opinion, be it politics, science, philosophy, or religion, some folks will take the word of an individual because of their post-nominal titles, their degrees, or affiliation with some one or other organizations. And such folks will prey on those that are willing to be spoon-fed and won't question them. If we slowed down to think, and applied something as basic as Descartes' Cartesian doubt method, we can use skepticism to find certain knowledge by questioning all beliefs and rejecting any idea that could be doubted, no matter how small the reason. Then, with such a method, we can get closer to things that are certain. And in his words, I think, therefore I am. I thank you for joining me flipping through the pages of this book. Please do let me know you were here. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and if you know of like-minded people, please share the channel. And now, I turn the page. Chapter 22. Etheric Faculties. Etheric faculties are extensions of the ordinary physical senses, enabling the possessor to appreciate vibrations pertaining to the etheric portion of the physical plane. Such impressions will be received through the retina of the eye, affecting, of course, its etheric matter. In some abnormal cases, other parts of the etheric body may respond as readily as, or even more readily than, the eye. This would usually be due to partial astral development, the sensitive areas of the etheric double nearly always corresponding to the astral chakrams. There are roughly two main kinds of clairvoyance, the lower and the higher. The lower variety appears sporadically in undeveloped people, such as savages of Central Africa, and as sort of massive sensation vaguely belonging to the whole etheric body, rather than an exact and definite sense perception communicated through a specialized organ. It is practically beyond the man's control. The etheric double being in exceedingly close relationship with the nervous system, any action on one of them reacts speedily on the other. In the lower clairvoyance, the corresponding nervous disturbance is almost entirely in the sympathetic system. In more developed races, the vague sensitiveness usually disappears as the mental faculties are developed. Later on, when the spiritual man begins to unfold, he regains clairvoyant power. This time, however, the faculty is precise and exact, under the control of the will, and exercised through a sense organ. Any nervous action set up is almost exclusively in the cerebrospinal system. The lower forms of psychism are most frequent in animals and very unintelligent human beings. Hysterical and ill-regulated psychism is due to the small development of the brain and the dominance of the sympathetic system. The large nucleated ganglionic cells in the system containing a very large portion of etheric matter, and thus being easily affected by coarse astral vibration. Etheric vision may be temporarily stimulated, e.g. by delirium tremens, so that the sufferer may see etheric as well as astral creatures. The snakes and other horrors seen in such cases are almost invariably creatures of low type which feast on alcoholic fumes exuding from the drunkard's body. It should be noted that the etheric double is peculiarly susceptible to the volatile constituents of alcohols. Clairvoyant faculty may also sometimes be exhibited under the influence of mesmerism, also by an increased tenseness of the nerves caused by excitement, hysteria, ill health, drugs, or certain ceremonial rites which induce self-hypnotism. It is not, however, advisable to allow oneself to be thrown into mesmeric sleep in order to obtain clairvoyant experiences, because domination of the will by that of another person tends to make the will of the subject weaker, and thus more liable to be acted upon by others. Occasionally, a person fortunate enough to have gained the friendship of etheric nature spirits may be helped by these creatures to attain flashes of temporary clairvoyance, in order that the person may see them. In order to cultivate such friendship, it must be remembered that these nature spirits are intensely shy and distrustful of men. They object to the physical emanations of the average man, of meat, tobacco, and alcohol, also to low selfish feelings such as lust, anger, or depression. Strong, unselfish feelings of a lofty nature create the kind of atmosphere in which nature spirits delight to bathe. Almost all nature spirits are fond of music, and some are especially attracted by certain melodies. C.W. Ledbetter writes that he has seen shepherd boys in Sicily playing on their homemade panpipe with an appreciative audience of fairies frisking around them, of which they were probably blissfully unconscious. Sometimes, however, peasants do see nature spirits, as the literature of many people affirm. One method of developing etheric sight is by utilizing the imagination. An endeavor is made to imagine what the inside of a physical object, such as a closed box, would be like, i.e., to guess, with an effort of strained attention, trying to see what that which by ordinary sight could not be seen. After many attempts, it is said that the guessing becomes more frequently correct than the theory of probability would demand, and presently the man begins actually to see etherically that which at first he only imagined. It is said that this practice is followed by the Zuni tribe of American Red Indians. See Service Magazine, April 1925, article by Beatrice Wood. Great numbers of people, if they will take the trouble to look under suitable conditions of light, can see the mesmeric fluid, i.e., the nerve ether, as it streams from the hands of the mesmerist. Baron Reichenbach, in the middle of the 19th century, records that he found over 60 persons able to see these emanations, and some could see also a somewhat similar emanation proceeding from physical magnets, from crystals, and from a copper wire, one end of which was exposed to sunlight. The observers were usually shut up in a dark room for some hours in order to make the retina more sensitive. It is reported that some French scientists who could not normally see the N rays became able to do so after sitting in darkness for 3 or 4 hours. We may here note that N rays are due to vibrations in the etheric double, causing waves in the surrounding ether. the student will recollect that N rays are given off by animals, flowers, and metals, but that all alike, when under the influence of chloroform, cease to emit them. They are also never emitted by a corpse. It will also be recollected that anesthetics such as chloroform expel etheric matter from the physical body, thus of course preventing the emanation of the rays. A full and controlled possession of etheric sight enables a man to see through physical matter. A brick wall, for example, seems to have the consistency of a light mist. The contents of a closed box could be accurately described and a sealed letter read. With a little practice, it is also possible to find a passage in a closed book. When the faculty is perfectly developed, it is completely under control and may be used or not used at will. It is said to be easy to change from ordinary to etheric vision as to alter the focus of the eyes, the change being in reality a focusing of consciousness. The earth is transparent to etheric vision to a certain extent, so that a man can see to a considerable depth, much as in fairly clear water. A creature burrowing underground could thus be seen, or a vein of coal or metal could be seen, if not too far below the surface. The medium through which we are looking is thus not perfectly transparent. Bodies of men and animals are, in the main, transparent, so that the action of the internal organs can be seen, and to some extent disease may be diagnosed in this manner. Etheric sight makes visible many entities, such as the lower orders of nature spirits, which have etheric bodies. In this class are nearly all the fairies, gnomes, and brownies, of which many stories are told in the Highlands of Scotland, Ireland, and other countries. There is a class of beautiful fairies with etheric bodies who live upon the surface of the earth, and who have come up the ladder of evolution through grasses and cereals, ants and bees, and tiny nature spirits. After their time as etheric fairies, they become salamanders or fire spirits, then sylphs or air spirits, and later still they pass into the kingdom of the angels. The forms of fairies are many and various, but most frequently human in shape and somewhat diminutive in size, usually with a grotesque exaggeration of some particular feature or limb. Etheric matter being plastic and readily molded by the power of thought, they are able to assume almost any appearance at will, but nevertheless, they have definite forms of their own, which they wear when they have no special reason for taking any other. In order to take a form other than his own, a fairy must conceive it clearly and keep his mind fixed upon it. As soon as his thought wanders, he will at once resume his natural appearance. Etheric matter does not obey the power of thought as instantaneously as does astral matter. We might say that mental matter changes with the thought. Astral matter so quickly after that the ordinary observer can scarcely note any difference. But with the etheric matter, one's vision can follow the growth or diminution without difficulty. An astral sylph flashes from one shape to another. An etheric fairy swells or decreases quickly, but not instantaneously. There are also limits, though wide ones, within which a fairy can alter his size. Thus a fairy naturally 12 inches high might expand himself to 6 feet high, but only with a considerable strain which he could not maintain for more than a few minutes. One of the streams of evolving life, after leaving the mineral kingdom, instead of passing into the vegetable kingdom, assumes etheric vehicles, which inhabit the interior of the earth, living actually within solid rock, which offer no impediment to their motion or their vision. At a later stage, though still inhabiting the solid rock, they live close to the surface of the earth, and the more developed of them can occasionally detach themselves from it for a short time. These gnomes, which have sometimes been seen, and perhaps more frequently heard, in caves or mines, become visible either by materializing themselves, by drawing around them a veil of physical matter, or, of course, by the spectator becoming temporarily etherically clairvoyant. They would be seen more frequently than they are, were it not for the rooted objection to the proximity of human beings which they share with all but the lowest types of nature spirits. Some of the lower types of etheric nature spirits are not pleasing to the aesthetic sense. There are shapeless masses with huge red gaping mouths, which live upon the loathsome etheric emanations of blood and decaying flesh. rapacious red-brown crustacean creatures which hover over houses of ill fame, and savage octopus-like monsters which gloat over the orgies of the drunkard and revel in the fumes of alcohol. The entities posing or accepted as tribal deities for whom blood sacrifices are made or food, preferably of flesh, is burnt are very low-grade creatures possessing etheric bodies, for it is only through etheric bodies that they can absorb physical fumes and derive either nourishment or pleasure from them. The stories told of ointments and drugs which, when applied to the eyes, enable a man to see the fairy people have a basis in truth. No anointing of the eyes could open the astral vision, though. If rubbed over the whole body, some ointments assist the astral body to leave the physical in full consciousness, but the application to the physical eyes might stimulate etheric sight. Etheric sight would, of course, make the etheric doubles of men visible. These doubles would often be seen hovering over newly made graves. At seances, etheric matter could be seen oozing from the left side of the medium, and one could perceive the various ways in which the communicating entities make use of it. Etheric sight makes visible several entirely new colors, quite different from those in the spectrum as we know it, and therefore indescribable in words we use at present. In some cases, these other colors are combined with colors that we know, so that two surfaces which to ordinary eyes appear to match perfectly would appear different to etheric sight. For the chemist, a whole fresh world would come under observation, and he could deal with ethers as he now deals with liquids or gases. There are, belonging to the mineral kingdom, many etheric substances, the existence of which is unknown to Western science. Even the bodies of men, in the first round, were constructed of etheric matter only, and resembled vague, drifting, and almost shapeless clouds. Etheric sight would inform us of the healthiness or otherwise of our surroundings, and we should be able to detect disease germs or other impurities. The beneficial effect of travel are partially due to the change of the etheric and astral influences connected with each place and district. Ocean, mountain, forest, or waterfall, each has its own special type of life, astral and etheric as well as visible, and therefore its own special set of impressions and influences. Many of the unseen entities are pouring out vitality, and in any case the vibrations which they radiate awaken unaccustomed portions of men's etheric doubles and of their astral and mental bodies, the effect being like that of exercising muscles which are not ordinarily called into activity, somewhat tiring at the time, yet distinctly healthy and desirable in the long run. Such amusements as rowing, for example, or swimming, especially in the sea, are of special value, for the reasons named. There is a basis of truth in the tradition that it is strengthening to sleep under a pine tree with the head to the north, for the magnetic currents flowing over the surface of the earth, by steady, gentle pressure, gradually comb out the entanglements and strengthen the particles both of the astral body and of the etheric double, and thus give rest and calm. The radiations of the pine tree make the man sensitive to the magnetic currents, and in addition, the tree is constantly throwing off vitality in that special condition in which it is easiest for man to absorb it. There is a kind of magnetic tide, and outflow and backflow of magnetic energy between the sun and earth, the turning points of which are at noon and midnight. The great etheric currents, which are constantly sweeping over the surface of the earth from pole to pole, possess a volume which makes their power as irresistible as that of the rising tide, and there are methods by which this stupendous force may be safely utilized, though unskilled attempt to control it would be fraught with danger. It is also possible to use the tremendous force of etheric pressure. In addition, by changing matter from a grosser to a subtler kind, the vast store of potential energy which lies dormant may be liberated and utilized, somewhat as latent heat energy may be liberated by a change of condition of visible matter. A reversal of the above process enables one to change matter from the etheric to the solid condition, and thus to produce a materialization phenomena. This faculty is somewhat employed in cases of emergency, where a man in his astral body, an invisible helper, is in need of means of acting on physical matter. The faculty demands considerable power of sustained concentration, and the mind must not be taken off for 1/2 second, or the matter of the materialized form will instantly fly back into its original condition. The reason why a physical object, after being reduced to the etheric condition, can afterwards be restored to its former shape is that the elemental essence is retained in the same shape, and when the will force is removed, the essence acts as a mold which the solidifying particles reaggregate. If, however, a solid object be raised to a gaseous condition by heat, the elemental essence which informed the object would be dissipated, not because the essence itself can be affected by heat, but because when its temporary body is destroyed as a solid, it pours back into the great reservoir of such essence, much as a man's higher principles, though entirely unaffected by heat and cold, are yet forced out of a physical body when the latter is destroyed by fire. Means must then be employed to reduce a physical object to etheric condition, and then to move it from one place to another, even though solid matter, such as a brick wall, by an astral current with great rapidity. As soon as the disintegrating force is withdrawn, the matter is forced by the etheric pressure into its original condition. When a man becomes etherically sensitive, in addition to sight, in most cases a corresponding change would at the same time take place in other senses. Thus, it is claimed by astrologers that planetary influences, by expanding or congesting the etheric atmosphere, make the conditions for meditation respectively more or less favorable. Incense is said to act on the etheric body somewhat as colors do on the astral body, and so may be employed to bring a man's vehicles rapidly into harmony. It appears that certain odors may be used to act on various parts of the brain. The effect of etheric sight is quite different from that of astral sight. In the case of astral sight, an entirely new element is introduced, often described as that of a fourth dimension. With such vision, for example, a cube would be seen as though it were all flattened out, all its side being equally visible as well as every particle within it. With the etheric sight, however, one merely sees through objects, and the thickness of matter through which one is looking makes a great difference to the clearness of the sight. Such considerations have no effect whatever on astral vision. The word through, used by W.T. Stead in referring to four-dimensional sight, is a perfect description not of astral but of etheric vision. Etheric sight can also be used for purposes of magnification. The method is to transfer impressions from the etheric matter of the retina direct to the etheric brain. The attention is forced in one or more etheric particles, and thus is obtained a similarity of size between the organ employed and some minute object being observed. A commoner method, though one demanding higher development, is to project a flexible tube of etheric matter from the center of the chakra between the eyebrows, having one atom at its end which serves as a lens. Such an atom must have all its 7 spiralae fully developed. The atom can be expanded or contracted at will. This power belongs to the causal body, so that when an etheric atom forms the lens of a system or reflecting counterparts must be introduced. By a further extension of the same power, the operator, by focusing his consciousness in the lens, can project it to distant points. The same power, by a different arrangement, can be used for diminishing purposes, thus giving a vision of something too large to be taken in at once by ordinary vision. This power was symbolized by a small snake projecting from the center of the forehead in the head dress of the Pharaoh of Egypt. Much of the clairvoyance known by dead people at a spiritualistic sense, enabling them to read passages out of a closed book, is of the etheric type. One of the varieties of telepathy is etheric, and may take either of 2 forms. In the first, an etheric image is made which can be seen by a clairvoyant. In the second, the etheric waves, which the creation of the image generates, radiate out and, striking upon another etheric brain, tend to reproduce in the same image. The organ in the brain for thought transference, both transmitting and receiving, is the pineal gland. If anyone thinks intently on an idea, vibrations are set up in the ether which permeates the gland, thereby causing a magnetic current which gives rise to a slight quiver or creeping feeling. This feeling indicates that the thought is clear and strong enough to be capable of transmission. With most people, the pineal gland is not yet fully developed, as it will be in the course of evolution. There is known to occult students a process by which rays of light may be bent so that after passing round an object they may resume exactly their former course. This would of course make the object round which the rays were bent invisible to ordinary sight. It may be surmised that this phenomena would result from a power to manipulate the particular form of etheric matter which is the medium for the transmission of light. Chapter 23. Magnetization of objects. A man may employ his magnetism or vital fluid not only for mesmerizing or healing other persons, but he may also use it to impregnate physical objects in a somewhat similar manner. Any object, in fact, which has been in close contact with an individual will absorb that individual's magnetism, and consequently will tend to reproduce in the person who wears it something of the same state of feeling or thought with which it is charged. This, of course, is part of the rationale of talismans, charms, and relics, as well as the feelings of devotion and reverential awe, which sometimes quite literally exude from the walls of cathedrals and churches, each stone of which is a veritable talisman, charged with the reverence and devotion of the builder, consecrated by the bishop, and reinforced by the devotional thought forms of successive generations for thousands of years. The process is continually at work, though few are conscious of it. Thus, for example, food tends to become charged with the magnetism of those who handle or come near it, a fact which is at the back of the strict rules which Hindus observe regarding eating food in the presence of or which has been subjected to the magnetism of one of the lower caste. To the occultist, magnetic purity is as important as physical cleanliness. Such food as bread and pastry are especially liable to be charged with the magnetism of the person who prepares them, owing to the fact that magnetism flows out most strongly through the hands. Fortunately, the action of fire in baking or cooking removes most kinds of physical magnetism. Some occult students, in order to prevent any avoidable mixture of magnetism, insist upon using only their own private eating utensils and even would not permit their hair to be cut except by someone whose magnetism they approved. The head, of course, being the part of the body where alien magnetism would be most objectionable. Books, especially those in a public library, tend to become loaded with all kinds of mixed magnetism. Precious stones, being the highest development of the mineral kingdom, have very great power of receiving and retaining impressions. Many jewels are saturated with feelings of envy and greed, and in the case of some of the great historical jewels, are impregnated with physical and other emanations associated with crimes that have been committed in order to possess them. Such jewels retain these impressions unimpaired for thousands of years, so that psychometers may see around them pictures of indescribable horror. For this reason, most occultists would discourage the wearing of jewels as a general rule. On the other hand, gems may be powerful reservoirs of good and desirable influence. Thus, for example, the Gnostic gems employed at initiation ceremonies 2,000 years ago retain even to this day powerful magnetic influence. Some Egyptian scarabei are still effective, though much older even than the Gnostic gems. Money in the form of coins and notes is frequently charged with highly unpleasant magnetism. Not only does it become charged with a great mixture of different kinds of magnetism, but it is, in addition, surrounded by the thoughts and feelings of those who have handled it. The disturbing and irritating effect of such emanations on astral and mental bodies has been compared to that produced by the bombardment of radium emanations on the physical body. The worst offenders are copper and bronze coins and old and dirty banknotes. Nickel is less receptive of evil influences than copper, while silver and gold are better still in this respect. Betting affords another example of physical objects absorbing and emanating magnetic influence. Many people, having observed that unpleasant dreams may often be caused by sleeping on a pillow which has been used by a person of unpleasant character. If wool is used of bedding or clothing, it is better not let it touch the skin, owing to it being saturated with animal influence. The method of deliberately manufacturing a talisman is, first, thoroughly to cleanse the object of its present etheric matter by passing it through a film of etheric matter which has been created for the purpose by an effort of will. The old etheric matter, or magnetism, having been thus removed, the ordinary ether of the surrounding atmosphere replaces it. For there is an etheric pressure somewhat corresponding to, though immensely greater than, atmospheric pressure. A similar process is then effected for astral and mental matter, the object thus becoming, as it were, a clean sheet on which one may write as one wills. The operator then, placing his right hand on the object, fills himself with the particular qualities which he wishes to convey to the talisman, and wills that those qualities shall flow into it. An experienced occultist can perform the whole process almost instantaneously by a strong effort of will, but others will need to spend more time on it. The above would constitute one of the class of general talismans. An adapted talisman is one specially charged to meet the requirements of a particular individual, almost like an individual prescription, rather than a general tonic. An ensouled talisman is one designated to continue as a source of radiation for centuries. There are two varieties. In one, there is placed in the talisman a fragment of a higher mineral which throws out a ceaseless stream of particles. These particles become charged with the force stored in the talisman, the actual work of distribution being done by the mineral, thereby greatly economizing energy. The second variety is one which the ingredients are so arranged as to make it a means of manifestation of one of certain classes of undeveloped nature spirits, these latter providing the force necessary for the dissemination of the influence. Such talismans may last for thousands of years, to the intense delight of the nature spirit and the great benefit of all who approach the magnetized center. A linked talisman is one so magnetized as to bring in close rapport with its maker, so that it becomes a kind of outpost of his consciousness. The wearer of the talisman could thus, through his link, send a cry for help to its builder, or the builder could direct a stream of influence through it to the wearer. Such a talisman would facilitate what Christian scientists call absent treatment. In rare cases, a physical talisman may be connected with the causal body of an adept, as was done with those talismans buried in various countries by Apollonius of Tyana about 1900 years ago, in order that the force which they radiated might prepare those places to be the centers of great events in the future. Some of those centers have already been utilized. Others are to be employed in the immediate future in connection with the work of coming Christ. Great shrines are usually erected on the spot where some holy men lived, where some great event, such as an initiation, took place, or where there is a relic of a great person. In any of these cases, a powerful magnetic center of influence has been created, which will persist for thousands of years. Even if the relic does not happen to be a very powerful one, or it is not even genuine, the centuries of devotional feeling poured out upon it by the host of visitors would make the place an active center for beneficent radiation. The influence of all such places on visitors and pilgrims is unquestionably good. It has already been mentioned that precious stones are naturally suited to be made into talismans or amulets. The Rudraska berry, used frequently for necklaces in India, is eminently adapted for magnetization where spiritual thought or meditation is required and disturbing influences are to be kept away. The beads made from the tulsi plant are another example, though the influence they give is of a somewhat different character. An interesting set of talismans are those objects which produce strong scents. The gums of which incense is made, for example, can be chosen so as to be favorable to spiritual and devout thought. It is also possible so to combine ingredients as to produce the opposite effect, as was sometimes done by medieval witches. A trained occultist makes a regular practice of charging many things which pass from him to others with beneficent influences, such for example as letters, books, or presents. By a single effort of the will, he may charge even a typed letter far more effectively than it would be unconsciously charged when written by hand by someone not familiar with these truths. Similarly, a trained occultist, by a mere wave of the hand, coupled with a strong thought, may almost instantaneously demagnetize food, clothing, bedding, rooms, etc. Such demagnetization, while removing magnetism which has been externally impressed, would not affect the innate magnetism of objects, such, for example, as the inherently unpleasant vibrations of dead flesh, which even cooking could not destroy. The process of demagnetizing rooms, etc., may be facilitated by the burning of incense or pastilles or by sprinkling water, the incense and water being first passed through the process recommended for making talismans. It should also be borne in mind that as physical matter in man is in exceedingly close touch with the astral and mental, coarseness and grossness in the physical vehicle almost necessarily imply a corresponding condition in the other vehicles. Hence, the great importance to the occultist of physical as well as magnetic or etheric cleanliness. The holy water used in certain Christian churches affords a clear example of magnetization, water being very readily charged with magnetism. The instructions given in the Roman Rite make it quite evident that the priest is required first to exorcise the salt and water, i.e., to cleanse them from all objectionable influences, and then, making the sign of the cross, he is directed to bless the elements, i.e., to pour his own magnetism into them, his will being directed to the purpose of driving away all evil thoughts and feelings. It is worth noting that salt contains chlorine, a fiery element, and hence the combination of water, the great solvent, with the fire, the great consumer, is highly effective as a cleansing agency. Precisely similar ideas underline many other ceremonies in the Christian Church, such as baptism, in which the water is blessed and the sign of the cross made over it, the consecration of churches and burial grounds, of the vessels of the altar, the vestments of the priest, bells, incense, confirmation, the ordination of priests and consecration of bishops. In the Eucharist, the wine has a very powerful influence upon the higher astral levels, while the water sends out even etheric vibrations. At baptism, in the liberal Catholic Church, the priest makes the sign of the cross over the forehead, throat, heart, and solar plexus of the child. This has the effect of opening up these etheric chakrams so that they grow to perhaps the size of a crown piece and begin to sparkle and whirl as they do in grown-up people. In addition, the magnetized water, as it touches the forehead, sets violently in vibration the etheric matter, stimulates the brain, and through the pituitary body affects the astral body, and through that, the mental body. Later, the priest, by anointing the top of the head with chrism, makes the chakram there serve as a kind of sieve, which rejects the coarser feelings, influences, or particles, and also, by an effort of will, he closes the four centers which have been opened. At confirmation, the effect which has been produced on the atmic principle is reflected into the etheric double. At the ordination of the priest, it is intended to clear the way between the higher principles and the physical brain. The blessing floods the etheric brain and is meant to run up through the pituitary body, which is the point of closest junction between the dense physical, the etheric, and the astral. The anointing of the head of the bishop with chrism is intended so to act on the Brahmarandra chakram that instead of the usual saucer-like depression, it becomes more like a projecting cone, such as is often seen in statues of the Lord Buddha. The ordination of the cleric is intended principally to act on the etheric body, that of the doorkeeper on the astral, that of the reader or lector on the mental, and that of the exorcist on the causal body. The exorcist is helped at his ordination to strengthen his power of healing. There seems to have been an old custom out of which has arisen that the present Roman method of anointing the organs of the senses, of sealing all the chakrams in the body of a dying man, lest objectionable entities should seize upon the body as the owner left it and employ it for purposes of evil magic. It is probable that many nervous affections could be helped by anointing with consecrated oil, and etheric disease might well be cured by means of unction. In a bishop's crozier, in the knob of which the consecrated jewels are placed, the etheric energy which radiates from the jewels is the outermost and most prominent, so prominent in fact that it would not be surprising if physical cures could be effected by its touch. Medieval alchemists also employed somewhat similar methods in their use of magnetized swords, drugs, etc. In the ancient mysteries, the thyrsus was a powerfully magnetized instrument which was laid against the spinal cord of the candidate, giving him in that way some of the magnetism with which it was charged. Chapter 24. Ectoplasm. Ectoplasm, from the Greek ektos, outside, and plasma, mold, i.e. that which is molded outside the human body, is a name given to the matter, mainly if not wholly etheric, which exudes from a medium and is employed for seance room phenomena. The late W.J. Crawford, in his books The Reality of Psychic Phenomena, 1916, Experiments in Psychical Science, 1918, Psychic Structures, 1921, describes the painstaking and masterly researches he undertook into such phenomena as table lifting or levitation and rapping. For full details, students are referred to those books, it being possible here to give a brief summary of such results as are directly pertinent to our present study. During all the experiments, the medium was fully conscious. W.J. Crawford approached the problem of table lifting, etc., purely as problems of mechanics, and by means of force registering appliances, both mechanical and electrical, he succeeded in discovering, by deduction from his observations, the modus operandi of the psychic structures employed. At a much later stage, he was able completely to verify his deductions by direct vision and by photography, as will be explained in due course. Briefly, it was found that the ectoplasm exuding from the medium was prepared and shaped by the operators who controlled the production of the phenomena into what he terms rods. These rods, or bars, are attached at one end to the medium and at the other by suction to table legs or other objects, psychic force being then applied through the rods and tables, etc., moved in various ways without any purely physical contact with any person present. Raps and many other noises are produced by the rods striking on floor, table, a bell, etc. By far the greater portion of the ectoplasm is usually obtained from the medium, though this is supplemented by a small portion from all or most of the other sitters present. The ectoplasm can sometimes, even though quite invisible to ordinary sight, be felt. It is described as clammy, cold, reptilian, almost oily, as though the air were mixed with particles of dead and disagreeable matter. The psychic rods issuing from the medium may vary in diameter at the extremities from ½ inch to 7 or 8 inches, and the free end of each rod seems able to assume various shapes and degrees of hardness. The end be flat or convex, circular or oval. It may be soft as the flesh of a baby or as hard as iron. The body of the rods feels solid a few inches from the free end, but then becomes intangible, though it resists pulls, pushes, shear, and torque. In this intangible portion, nevertheless, a flow of cold, spore-like particles can be felt, the flow being outwards from the medium. There appears to be reason to believe that in some cases, though not in levitations, there is a complete circulation of etheric matter out from the medium and back to her again at a different part of the body. The condition of the end of the rod, as regards size and hardness, can be varied on demand. The larger rods are usually fairly soft at the end, the smaller ones only becoming dense and hard. W.J. Crawford considers it probable that the rods consist of a bundle of fine threads intimately connected and adhering to one another. The psychic force passes along the threads, stiffening the whole structure into a rigid girder, which can then be moved as desired by forces applied within the body of the medium. Certain experiments seem to indicate that the end of a rod consists of a thick and more or less elastic film or skin, stretched over a thin, somewhat serrated elastic frame. The elasticity of the film is limited, and if too highly stressed, the film may rupture, leaving the serrated frame exposed. The fact that an electroscope can be discharged by being touched by a rod indicates that the rod acts as a conductor of high-tension electricity, discharging to earth through the medium's body to which it is attached. On the other hand, a rod placed across the terminals of a bell circuit does not cause the bell to ring, thus showing that it offers high resistance to low-tension current. White light usually destroys rod formations. Even rays reflected from a surface on which psychic forces exerted interfere with the phenomena. Red light, however, if not too strong, does not appear to injure the psychic structure. Neither does light emanating from luminous paint, which has been exposed for some hours to sunlight. Usually, the structures are quite invisible, though occasionally glimpses of them may be obtained. The structures have been successfully photographed by flashlight, but great care must be taken not to injure the medium. The shock to the medium when the flashlight impinges on the ectoplasm is much greater when the structure is under stress than when it is not stressed. The large number of photographs taken confirm in every detail the conclusions arrived at by deduction from the phenomena themselves. The rigidity of a rod varies with the amount of light to which it is subjected, the hard end being, as it were, partially melted when exposed to light. In the case of objects being moved by psychic force, there are two principal methods employed. In the first, one or more rods are projected from the medium, very frequently from the feet or ankles, sometimes from the lower part of the trunk, and are attached direct to the object to be moved, thus forming cantilevers. When tables are moved horizontally, the rods would usually be attached to the table legs, where they are lifted into the air. The rod or rods are often spread out like a mushroom at the ends and attached to the undersurface of the table. In the second method, the rod or rods projecting from the medium are attached to the floor, and from the point of attachment they are continued to the object to be moved, thus forming no longer a cantilever but something similar to a lever of the first order, the fulcrum being between the weight and the power. Rods may be either straight or curved. They may also be held suspended in the air in a rigid condition, thus showing that they do not require to be pressing on material bodies in order to remain rigid. In the case of the cantilever method, the whole of the mechanical stress is transferred to the medium, or more accurately, the greater portion to the medium and a much smaller portion to the sitters. This can be ascertained by ordinary mechanical appliances such as weighing machines and spring balances. If a table is levitated, for example, by means of a cantilever, the weight of the medium will be increased by about 95% of the weight of the table, and that of the other sitters come proportionately. When, on the other hand, the rods are attached to the floor, the weight of the levitated table is transmitted direct to the floor, and the medium's weight, instead of being increased, is decreased. The decrease being due to the weight of the ectoplasm forming the rod, one end of which rests on the floor. When the force is transmitted along a rod in order to hold an object, such a table, firmly to the floor, the weight of the medium has been observed to be reduced by as much as 35.5 pounds. On another occasion, when the ectoplasmic structure was not stressed, the weight of the medium has been reduced by 54.5 pounds, nearly half the normal weight of the medium. Cantilevers are usually employed to move or lift light objects, but for heavy objects or for the transmission of great force, the rod or rods are attached to the floor. Often a force approximating to 100 weight is exerted. During levitation of objects, the stress on the medium is often apparent in the stiffness and even iron-like rigidity of the muscles, principally of the arms, but also of the whole muscular system. Later in his investigations, however, W.J. Crawford found that the muscular rigidity had apparently entirely disappeared. The production of these phenomena appears to result in a permanent loss of weight, both of mediums and sitters, but only to the extent of a few ounces. The sitters may lose more weight than the medium. As a rule, the placing of any material object within the space occupied by a rod immediately breaks the line of communication, destroying the rod as a rod. A thin object, however, such as a pencil, may be passed through the vertical portion of a rod with impunity, but not through the portion between the medium and the table. Interference with this portion may cause physical injury to the medium. In order to make it possible for a rod to touch or adhere to, e.g., a floor or table, the end of the rod has to be specially prepared, being made denser than the rest of the rod. The process appears to be troublesome, or at least to consume time and force. Consequently, the gripping portions of a structure are always kept to the minimum. The method of gripping by suction, as can easily be demonstrated by soft clay, referred to below, sometimes the suckers can be heard slipping over the surface of wood or taking new grips. Many instances, as well as photographers, are given by W.J. Crawford of impressions on putty or soft clay produced by impact of rods. These impressions are often covered with marks similar to the fabric of the medium's stockings. The resemblance, however, is superficial, it being impossible to produce such impressions by actually pressing a stockinged foot on the clay. The impression made by the rod is much sharper than can be obtained by ordinary means, and is such as could be obtained if a fine viscous material were to cover the stockinged fabric, to harden and then to be pressed on the clay. Further, the stocking marks may be greatly modified. The delicate pattern and tracery of the threads may be distorted, thickened, partly covered over, or broken, though still remaining recognizable as that of the stocking fabric. The deduction is that the ectoplasm is at first in a state like that of a semi-liquid, that it oozes through and round the holes in the fabric and partly sets on the outside of the stocking. It is of glutinous, fibrous nature and takes almost the exact form of the fabric. It is then pulled off the stocking and built around the end of the rod. For a large impression, the skin is thickened and strengthened by the addition of more materializing matter, and thus the original imprint may be twisted, distorted, or partially obliterated. Similarly, finger impressions may be made by a rod, though these may be different in size from normal ones and may be much more clearly and regularly cut than would be possible with ordinary finger impressions. Raps, ranging from the slightest taps to blows of sledgehammer strength, as well as many other sounds, are produced by semi-flexible rods with suitably prepared ends, being struck against material objects. The production of raps is accompanied by decrease of the medium's weight. The amount of decrease, which may be as much as 20 pounds, or more, being apparently directly proportionate to the intensity of the rap. The reason is apparent. The rods being formed of matter from the medium's body, the striking of such matter on the floor, etc., necessarily transfers some of the medium's total weight through the rod to the floor. The loss of weight is temporary only, being restored when the material of the rod returns to the medium. The production of raps causes a mechanical reaction in the medium, as though she were being pushed backwards or struck. This reason may cause her to make slight motions with her feet. The stress on the medium, however, is nothing like that caused by the levitation of objects. Heavy blows produced by a large rod are not usually delivered quickly. Light raps, however, usually produced by 2 or more thin rods, may be produced with incredible rapidity, the operators appearing to have great command over the rods. In general, the production of these phenomena throws stress on all the sitters, as is apparent by spasmodic jerks, sometimes quite severe, which go round the whole circle previous to levitation. It would appear that the process of loosening and removing etheric matter from the bodies of the sitters takes place in jerks, and to some extent affects them all together. W.J. Crawford reports that an entity purporting to have been whilst alive a medical man, and so to speak through the medium, on this occasion entranced for the purpose, stated that there are 2 kinds of substances used in the production of phenomena. One is taken in comparatively large quantities from the medium and sitters, all or nearly all being returned to them at the close of a seance. The other can be obtained only from the medium, and as it consists of the most vital material from the interior of her nerve cells. It can be taken only in minute quantities without injury to the medium. Its structure is broken up by the phenomena, and therefore it cannot be returned to the medium. This statement has not been verified or confirmed in any way, and is given purely on its merits. W.J. Crawford devised and used with great success the staining method of tracing the movements of ectoplasm. Ectoplasm possessing the property of adhering strongly to such a substance as powdered carmine, the latter is placed on its path, when a colored track will be found. By this means, it was discovered that ectoplasm issues from and returns to the lower part of the trunk of the medium. It has considerable consistency, for it has a strong tearing action on the stockings and of other clothing, and will sometimes pull out whole threads, several inches long, from a stocking, carry, and deposit the same in a vessel or clay placed some distance from the medium's feet. The ectoplasm follows a path down the legs and enters the shoes, passing between stocking and shoe, wherever there is space. If it has picked up dye on its way, it will deposit this at any place where foot, stocking, and shoe are in close contact, i.e., where there is no sufficient room for it to pass. The solidification, as well as the materialization of the hard end of a rod, is effected immediately the rod issues from the medium's body. For this reason, the free end of the rod, unless it be one of the thinnest, cannot penetrate closely woven cloth or even wire netting of 1-inch mesh, if placed more than 1 inch or 2 in front of the medium. If such screens, however, are very close to the medium's body, an imperfect materialization of the end of the rod may take place, and a limited psychic phenomena may occur. The evolution of ectoplasm from the body of a medium is accompanied by strong muscular movements all over the body, and the fleshy parts of the body, especially from the waist downwards, become reduced in size as though the flesh had caved in. W.J. Crawford is convinced in the production of seance room phenomena there are at least 2 substances employed. 1, a component forming the basic part of the psychic structure, which is invisible, impalpable, and generally outside the range of physical things altogether, and 2, a whitish, transparent, nebulous substance mixed with one in order to enable 1, to enact on physical matter. 2, he considers it in all probability identical with the material used in materialization phenomena. Many phenomena of materialization are described with that scrupulous and minute attention to detail so characteristic of German investigators in a large work entitled Phenomena of Materialization by Baron von Schrenck-Notzing, 1913, and translated by E. Fournier Dalby, 1920. In addition to elaborate descriptions of large numbers of seances and phenomena, there are given some 200 photographs of materialized forms or apparitions of many kinds, ranging from threads or masses of ectoplasm to fully formed faces. The main conclusions may be epitomized as follows. These are taken largely for convenience from a lecture on supranormal physiology and the phenomena of ideoplastics by Dr. Gustave Gelly, a Paris psychologist and physician, which is printed at the end of Baron Notzing's book. From the body of the medium, there emanates a substance which at first is amorphous or polymorphous. It may appear as ductile dough, a true protoplasmic mass, a kind of shaking jelly, simple bumps, thin threads, cords, and narrow rigid rays, a broadband, a membrane, fabric, woven material, or net with fringes and rucks. The thread, or fiber-like nature of the substance has frequently been observed. It may be white, black, or gray, sometimes all three appearing together. White is perhaps the most frequent. It appears to be luminous. Usually, it seems to be odorless, though sometimes it may have a peculiar smell, impossible to describe. There seems no doubt that it is subject to the influence of gravity. To the touch, it may be moist and cold, viscous and sticky, more rarely dry and hard. When expanded, it is soft and slightly elastic. When formed as cords, it is hard, knotty, and fibrous. It may feel like a spider's web passing over the hand. The threads are both rigid and elastic. It is mobile, with a creeping reptilian motion, though sometimes it moves suddenly and quickly. A draught may set it in motion. Touching it produces a painful reaction on the medium. It is extremely sensitive and appears and disappears with lightning rapidity. It is usually sensitive to light, though sometimes the phenomena will withstand full daylight. Flashlight photographs of it can be taken, though the flash act like a sudden blow on the medium. During the production of the phenomena, the cabinet containing the medium is usually in darkness, but the curtains are frequently drawn aside, and outside the cabinet red light is used, and sometimes even white light up to 100 candle power. The substance has an irresistible tendency towards organization. It assumes many forms, sometimes indefinite and non-organized, but most frequent organic. Fingers, including nails, are perfectly modeled. Complete hands, faces, and other shapes may be formed. The substance emanates from the whole body of the medium, but especially from the natural orifices and extremities, from the top of the head, the breast, and the fingertips. The most usual origin and most easily observed is the mouth, the inner surface of the cheeks, the gums, and the roof. The materialized forms have a certain independence, a hand, for example, being able to move its fingers and grasp the hand of the observer, though sometimes the human skin seems to repel the phantoms. The structures are sometimes smaller than in nature, being really miniatures. The lack of the materializations has been observed to be without organic form, being merely a mass or amorphous substance. The forms containing a minimum of substance necessary to make them appear real. The forms may disappear very gradually, fading away, or almost instantaneously. During the whole time, it is clear that the forms are in physiological and psychical connection with the medium. The sensation reflex of the structures coalescing with that of the medium. Thus, a pin inserted into the substance would cause pain to the medium. It seems that the substance can be influenced both by the general direction and the submatter of the thoughts of the sitters. In addition, the medium, usually in the hypnotic state, is exceedingly open to the influence of suggestion. Pieces of materialized forms have been seized in a porcelain dish and retained. On one occasion, when examined afterwards, 2 pieces of skin were found which, under microscope, were recognized as human. On another occasion, 3 or 4 cc of a transparent liquid without air bubbles were found. Analysis revealed a colorless, slightly turbid, non-viscous, odorless liquid, slightly alkaline, with a whitish precipitate. The microscope disclosed the components of cell detritus and saliva, the substance evidently originating from the mouth. On yet another occasion, a bundle of hair, not in any way resembling the darker hair of the medium, was found, the hand of the observer being covered with mucus and moisture. In addition, fragments of other substances are sometimes found, such as face powder or shreds of the medium's clothing. Chapter 25. Conclusion. Considerable as is the total information at present available regarding man's etheric body and etheric phenomena in general, nevertheless, the serious student will at once perceive that the field for future research is vastly greater than the fragments of it which have so far been explored. In view of the intimate bearing which the structure, nourishment, and health of the etheric body have on the physical health and on the functioning not only of the physical body but also of the other bodies in their connection with the physical, it is abundantly evident that research into every class of etheric phenomena should lead to discoveries of great scientific interest and beneficent import to man. A number of methods of conducting such research is open to us. First, we have the method of direct clairvoyant observation at different levels, it being probable in view of the rapid development of certain sections of the human race at the present time, that large numbers of persons will find themselves in the non-distant future in possession of etheric faculties. In addition to etheric faculties, normally unfolded in ordinary course of evolution, Dr. Kilner's line of work appears to indicate that these faculties may be stimulated by the use of screens such as he employed, and possibly by other physical means yet to be devised. Both mesmerism and hypnotism might also, with adequate safeguards, be employed to make available latent etheric faculty. The use of photography may, in the future, become very extensive and important, the salts used in the photographic plate being sensitive to wavelengths and degrees of light beyond the reach of the normal eye. A further method of research using ultraviolet light also offers great promise. A laboratory for this purpose has recently been opened at Leeds through the initiative and far-seeing enterprise of some members of the Theosophical Society in that town. The methods employed by W.J. Crawford may well be pursued by other workers, and additions thus be made to the exceedingly valuable results obtaining by the able investigator named. As to the desirability of utilizing the seance room for obtaining such materialization phenomena as those obtained by Baron von Notzing, there is likely to be divergence of opinion. It is fairly generally admitted that phenomena of this nature may easily be high injurious to medium, both physically and in other ways, and there is also something distinctly unsavory about the materializations produced by these mediums. On the other hand, it may be urged that if mediums are willing to sacrifice themselves in the cause of science, science is justified in accepting such sacrifices, and further, that science as such has no concern with the savoriness or otherwise of natural phenomena. It seems fairly certain, however, that the highest spiritual teachers of the present day do not look with favor on the seance room. Yet, It may be argued that in other ages the use of Vestal virgins, soothsayers, prophets, and other mediums received the sanction and approval of high authorities. The present writer, therefore, refrains from offering any dogmatic conclusion on this point. The possibility of utilizing knowledge of etheric phenomena for purpose of healing would appear to be almost limitless. For many cases of disease, physical, emotional, and mental, the employment of vital or magnetic healing, and also mesmerism and hypnotism, would seem to be in the line with the general progress of thought in this direction. In particular, the use of mesmerism to produce anesthesia for surgical or other purposes in place of ether gas or chloroform would appear to possess many recommendations. It may also be surmised that the science of osteopathy, in conjunction with the study of force centers and the flow of vitality in the human body, should lead to valuable results. The remarkable discoveries of Dr. Abrams, which appear to have been accepted, at least partially, by the medical profession, would seem to be capable of conferring almost incalculable benefit on disease-ridden human race of today. Although it is not, the present writer believes, rigidly proved, yet it would appear to be almost certain that the methods employed in the Abrams system act directly and indirectly on and through the etheric body. The recent revival of healing by various Christian churches would also seem to have a great future, and there can be little doubt that such methods, while far from being wholly physical, yet do work, to some extent, through etheric matter. The possibility of utilizing our knowledge of etheric phenomena extends, however, even further afield than is roughly indicated above. Thus it seems more than probable that an important and hitherto almost unrecognized factor in the treatment of disease and the preservation of health would derive from the etheric, apart from the purely physical properties of drugs, water, gases, the air, emanations of soils and minerals, fruit, flowers, and trees. It is possible in the future that we may discover health resorts, either on land, lake, or sea, which depend for their curative power on their etheric properties. The attention which has recently been devoted to the wider use of sunlight obviously has a close bearing on what we know concerning the emanations of prana from the sun and its diffusion in the atmosphere and its absorption by living beings. It may be that further knowledge of etheric and vital phenomena may lead to a profound change of attitude towards the use in medicine and dietetics of substances which have passed through or are derived from animal organisms. It is a reasonable conjecture that those elusive substances known as vitamins may owe their beneficent properties to the presence in them, in one form or another, of prana, or possibly to the quality of the etheric matter they contain. A recognition of the fact that the vitality of the body is derived not from food, but direct from the atmosphere, may well lead to a radical change in the dietetic treatment of sick persons, and also to a much greater use of fasting as a curative energy. Those who are familiar with the literature of fasting will no doubt be aware that several writers on this interesting subject have already deducted from actual observation that the connection between assimilation of food and the acquirement of vital energy is very far from being simple or direct. It is now generally recognized that the use of electricity for curative purposes has not fulfilled all that was at first hoped for it. It may be that a deeper knowledge of etheric phenomena will be of assistance in devising better methods of utilizing electricity for curative purposes. The association of electricity with etheric matter, of which the etheric double is composed, is a phenomena which may thus be turned to valuable account. In fact, it would scarcely be too much to say that in the future, the etheric body being the habitat, so to say, of the life principle in its physical aspect, may receive as much attention as, or even more than, is now given to the material physical body. The utilization eventually of energy associated with the physical ether for many purposes is obvious and needs no insistence here. The student of occultism, however, will recollect the warning that men will not be permitted to release the almost incalculable forces latent in atomic matter until it is assured that such forces will be used beneficently and not for the purposes of destruction, as has unfortunately happened in the case of so many discoveries in the past. It is further evident that the discovery of the etheric grades of matter will open up new vistas in chemistry and physics, and may even be turned to useful account in the production of food substances of all kinds, of electric conductors or insulators, materials for clothing, and many other substances used in daily life. Finally, both on its own intrinsic account and also as to knowledge of even higher things, a recognition by orthodox scientists of the existence of the etheric body, and a study of its constitution and behavior, both of which we venture to think cannot now be long delayed, may prove a firm foundation on which may be raised a vast superstructure of knowledge of ultra-physical things. For, to adapt and abridge the closing paragraphs of the Idyll of the White Lotus, that which is to come is grander, more majestically mysterious than the past. By slow and imperceptible progress, the teachers of men drink their life from purer sources and take their message more directly from the soul of existence. Life has in it more than the imagination of man can conceive. The real blossom of life grows above the stature of men, and its bulb drinks deep from the river of life. In the heart of that flower, men will read the secrets of the controlling forces of the physical plane, and will see, written within it, the science of mystic strength. He will learn how to expound spiritual truths and to enter into the life of his highest self, and he can learn also how to hold within him the glory of that higher self, and yet to retain life upon his planet so long as it shall last, if need be, to retain life in the vigor of manhood till his entire work is completed, and he has taught to all who look for light these three truths. 1. The soul of man is immortal, and its future is the future of a thing whose growth and splendor has no limit. 2. The principle which gives life is in us and without us, is undying and eternally beneficent, is not heard or seen or smelt, but is perceived by the man who desires perception. 3. Each man is his absolute lawgiver, the dispenser of glory or gloom to himself, the decreer of his life, his reward, his punishment. These truths, which are as great as life itself, are as simple as the simplest mind of man. Let the good of knowledge be given to all those who are hungry for it. End of chapter, and also this is the end of the reading of the Etheric Double, The Health Aura of Man by A.E. Powell. If you haven't done so, please do hit that like button, share this with your friends, and subscribe to the channel.